name is Hamish Hallett, and I am a political journalist at Common Sense. I've been joined by Tyrone, who is a sports journalist at this incredible network. Now, for today, we'll be discussing or even just debating what happened this past Sunday. Now, if you don't know what happened this past Sunday, there were a bunch of protests outside Old Trafford, which is Manchester United's football stadium. It went quite violent, quite ugly, few ugly scenes, and even fans went onto the pitch of Manchester United's game, pretty much. And the actual game between Manchester United and Liverpool had to be suspended. And what this does do is create a debate about if fans are right in demanding change, in demanding football owners like the Glazers to come out of Manchester United, or are they just being a bit spoiled? Now, Tyrone, as you are a sports journalist, maybe you know a bit more information about this sort of debate. So yeah, what are your kind of thoughts then about what happened, this past Sunday? Big side, man.
Yeah, but I understand the fans' frustration because even myself, as a Manchester United fan, literally for the best part of 20 years now, I've seen the decline, whether it be like our general performance, I guess, since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, but then also in terms of general recruitment, which not necessarily is the fault of the Glazers themselves, but from the lack of investment into the infrastructure around Manchester United, also lack of investment into the stadium itself in terms of its general upkeep. I think the owners, especially the owners of a global brand like Manchester United, they have a lot to answer for. And I think the protests this weekend was the fans' way of saying enough's enough.
Yeah.
Like the Super League was bad or not so bad. In fact, the Super League was really just the prime opportunity because that was just the ultimate money grab. And that was the fans' way of saying, in terms of like the protests and everything, that, okay, we've tried to stay quiet for long now, but now enough's enough. Like, we want you out of our club.
Totally.
Like, we want you out of our club. I think that was the ultimate message. It initially started off as a peaceful protest, but then there was a few guys who just took it into a completely different direction, and there was quite violent. And then even in terms of, I think, the COVID protocols as well, literally broke all of them that was in place even for the game as well. So that was one of the main contributing factors behind the postponement of the game itself.
Totally.
So,
yeah. I feel like, that's the thing, because I know even football fans were like outside the hotels. I think it was the Maori or something. It was crazy, and there was like mad scenes of like protesters going outside. I think there's a video of quite a few police officers actually dragging a football fan. I don't know if you saw it. It's pretty bad video actually of showing that. But just to kind of touch on the actual protests themselves, I think where I stand on this is I support their right to protest. But I don't support the way it went towards violence, towards attacking police officers. That's where I kind of stand on that. And I find that the fact is, football personally, I'm an Arsenal fan, as you can tell, should not be, I don't think should be, dominated by owners, quite frankly, who don't care about the game and only care for their back pockets, which I think we both can agree on. Kroenke, if that's with Arsenal, or the Glazers are kind of doing that. And I feel like the way the game kind of got suspended, I thought was, in my eyes, and maybe you disagree with me with this, is a good sign that the protest has worked. The fact they are trying to impact people, they're trying to impact the game to enable change. But the only issue is, and it comes with a bit more of a debate, is this going to push owners like the Glazers out of Manchester United? Is this going to push out other owners like Kroenke out of Arsenal and things like that? So that's the bigger question, is like, do these protests have the big impact of pushing these owners out? That's the bigger question.
To be honest, I think the answer is no. I think, especially with the protests that happened over this past weekend, more than anything, it impacted the players, because now United players and the Premier League generally, they have this issue of fixture scheduling, where Man United have pretty much midweek games every week up until the end of the season. And they also have to fit in this game as well. So Man United, I think They've got Europa League semi-final second leg, or they would have had it depending on
Yeah.
when this is out. They've got, I think, another 5 Premier League games as well, and then on top of that as well, the potential of a Europa League final. In the midst of all of that, and that's, I think, over the next 3 weeks, because I think the season
Yeah.
finishes on the 23rd. I want to say.
Yes, I think the Europa League is on the 20. Guys, I think the Europa League final is like end of May, and I know Champions League final is in the end of May as well. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. I think. Yeah.
So it's like United now have to play the same amount of games in fewer days, already compiling a very unique situation within the midst of this whole entire campaign. The fact that the campaign started in, I think it was the 12th of September, but we've played the same amount of games in a shorter period as what would have usually been played in other seasons. So it's like we've had to fit the same amount of games in the best part of a month less.
Yeah.
And then having this protest to then cause a postponement to further congest the fixture schedule just makes it even worse, especially for Man United, who have had a somewhat underrated season. I say, looking at
Really?
finishes, I'll
Okay.
say I'll say that only because the way that they've played a lot of the season, it doesn't look like a team who have finished second, or a team that could have potentially been challenging for the title had they performed in a few certain games, especially like when they played Sheffield United at home, when I think they drew West Brom, I want to say as well.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, yeah,
Those 2 games, that was 5 points dropped,
yeah.
and that's with United just 10 points off of City right now. So had they won both of those games, then we could be talking about a much closer title race, as opposed to the potential of Man City clinching the title this weekend.
Totally. I feel like that's maybe that kind of adds maybe to the whole protest not really being very good in terms of the direction of it potentially,
Yeah,
because it's like the players themselves are going to get angry by the fact that this game's got suspended. They have to then move that game. They have to add more games on top of it. And we've already seen, and I think maybe you written an article about this on Common Sense about the fact that more and more players having to are getting injured, for example, during the season. The fact that more and more games get more and more tired. So actually, maybe the protests aren't actually. Maybe the actual protesters themselves are actually isolating people like the players, like the managers as well, and maybe even like pundits. I think Gary Neville was actually and Jamie Carragher were both very quite supportive of the protests, but maybe not the extent of being suspended. So it's like, so maybe are then the fans then are they actually right in demanding change, or are they just spoiling it for everyone else? That's kind of, I want to get your answer on it. I feel like you're kind of avoiding it.
I
Come on,
think
just an answer. Come on.
I think they're right to demand change in the club, especially when they see the direction in which the club or the owners have tried to move the club. I do also believe that the Premier League have a massive role to play in this, especially in terms of the rule around ownership, which has basically been like with a lot of owners, they've been able to come and buy a controlling stake in football clubs, and there's not really been any sort of, I say there's been like the fit and proper persons tests, there's been sort of like the checks in terms of I think a financial standpoint as well. The
Yeah.
issue with that, especially with the manner in which the Glazers bought Manchester United, I believe, was about, I think it was 70% of the money which they used to finance the purchase was leveraged from loans, which then put Man United into debt. And in terms of even the general or net investment into the club, like over the last, I think, 10 years, the Glazers have taken more money out of the club than they've actually put into the club as a whole, aside like excluding transfers.
Yeah.
Like excluding transfers, because if we add transfers into this, you're looking at the best part of, I think, £1 billion or not far off that spent in the last 10 years. And especially since Sir Alex Ferguson left, I think they've spent about £750 million. And right now, looking at the team, there are at least a good 2 or 3 players off of being serious title contenders. And those won't be small purchases either. That could easily be the best part of another 200 million. Once again, bringing it up to another £1 billion since Sir Alex Ferguson departed. So yeah, I think more than anything, a serious consideration that has to be looked at moving forward is the 50+1 rule. But then again, with that, especially looking at the side of the owners, what owners would be willing to just accept that their controlling stake in a club would be diminished to such an extent? That's another angle that you actually have to look at as well now, because you'd have to decrease owners' controlling stake or percentage of ownership of the club. Then the manner in which you'd have to then issue out the shares. Who are you issuing it out to? Are you issuing it to the supporters trust? Are you issuing it to just well-known fans who are just vocal about their opinions? Are you issuing it to whether it be like well-known people such as Gary Neville, who are part of the club, are former players? Like, how are you going to then distribute that 51% that you're trying to allocate outside of the owners themselves? Like, there's so many things that you've got to take into consideration when you're looking at proposing changes as seismic as these. Because especially with the 50+1 rule, we're talking about it now, but the reference point that we see, or that we've seen spoken about, has been Germany. And Germany implemented that, I think it was 1998, with the whole 50+1 rule, in terms of ensuring that the fans still had the majority vote, the majority ruling on all decisions pretty much in and around the clubs. And I say one thing a lot of people don't realize is there's a few clubs that have actually transgressed or found loopholes in and around the 50+1 rule, which is why I say RB Leipzig is, I say in Germany, they're considered to be a plastic club because they are basically bankrolled by Red Bull. And the RB, I say the reason why is not Red Bull Leipzig is because in Germany, they're not allowed to have sort of like companies in the actual name of clubs themselves, which is why I believe is Rasenbollen Leipzig, which they can then shorten to RB Leipzig and then just keep it in brand with all of the other clubs that Red Bull own as well. So it's like they've got RB Salzburg, I think, New York Red Bulls, and I think 2 or 3 others around the world. I can't remember them at the moment. But you just have to look at an example like that. Another one including Wolfsburg, Bayer Leverkusen as well. Like all of these are pretty much either bankrolled or heavily supported by massive corporations, like whether it be German-based or just globally based as well. I think even Wolfsburg come into it with Volkswagen as well. So there's so many different examples that a lot of people don't realize are actually not fully in line with the 50+1 rules. So it's like with all of these rules, there's a loophole.
I mean, I think there's always a loophole to everything, isn't there? I think that maybe the slight, because this is the thing, I do support the protests, and I think I support what they are doing. But then it's like, well, what do you then propose, right? Exactly. And I understand the whole 50+1, and I think I'm not as knowledgeable as you on this whole rule, which I think I'm going to try and definitely look into it. But exactly what you've said is it's the loopholes, which I don't think a lot of people understand. And there's so many moving parts. This is not just a protest. This is not just the Glazers. This is not just English football. It's so many different moving parts. Like, as you mentioned, the whole Red Bull, Leipzig, German club, and I think there's Red Bull Salzburg in Austria. I think it is, or Austria. Yeah, Austria. That's it. And there's so many moving parts to it. And it's so complicated. It's exceedingly complicated. I think a lot of fans want them to have that more ownership. But then that's also coming with loads of pros and loads of cons to it. And it's really, really difficult. And I find that, and this is the thing, how do you, because as you mentioned about why would owners give up some of their stake in their clubs? Like, why would they want to do that, And the question is, how on earth do you, if let's say English football goes towards that 50+1 rule,
Mm.
How do you implement that? Does the Premier League get involved? But once the Premier League gets involved, their stake of like their integrity or whatever gets removed as well. You know,
Mm.
so it's so many different things and so many different moving parts that I think is very difficult to address. I don't think maybe the fans at the protests don't totally understand. Maybe that's how I potentially see it.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Definitely.
Who knows? Because especially with the manner in which they've gone about the protests,
Mm.
they did what they did on Sunday, but then now I think they're just giving bad reviews to TeamViewer, who's going to be United's new sponsors as well. So it's like I'm not sure, I can't remember what website it was. I'm not sure if it's Trustpilot or something along those lines. You just suddenly saw their reviews or like their overall rating just plummet down to like 1.3 stars. But you're just thinking they're actually bringing money into the club, which will allow us to move forward. So if that's the fans' way of hurting the pockets of the owners, I'm 6 one way, half a dozen the other. Because I'm like, yes, I can understand your frustration, but TeamViewer are ultimately sponsors that are looking to bring money into the club, but is not the issue that the money's coming in, is what's being done with it. So if more than anything, aim directly for the owners. Like I say, I'm not inciting violence. Just put it out there. I'm not inciting any violence,
I know, don't worry.
but like actually like make sure that you're directing it solely at them as opposed to directing it at the club or directing it where you think the owners are going to feel it, but then you have all of this sort of collateral damage, such as the players, such as the sponsors, such as just general logistics or even the partners of the clubs, because the hotels that the players were staying at didn't need to have that sort of ruckus on that day, because I think there was a good few thousand fans both at the hotels and outside the ground, and then some of them eventually ended up breaking in. And with the police force, the police were aware that there was going to be protests, but they wasn't ready for the numbers, which was quite vast. Which I think, I say in terms of numbers, I think this one probably had the most out of all of the protests that's occurred over the last 2 weeks. Because I know there was, I think
Yeah.
it was Chelsea first, or was it Liverpool? I can't remember which one. I think it was Chelsea
I
and
think
Liverpool.
it might have been Liverpool first, and then it was like quite a small one. Then it was Chelsea,
Yeah,
then Arsenal, and
yeah,
then probably Man United. I think it was something like that. Yeah.
yeah. I think that was it, because it's like with Liverpool fans, like they were all like RIP Liverpool,
Yeah.
like. But then to be honest, Liverpool are kind of known big big power plays or money moves like this, especially being a part of the original Big Five, who was involved in the breakaway of the Premier Division to become the Premier League, or I think it was the Carling Premier League in 1991-92,
Mm.
as was Manchester United, Arsenal, I think Chelsea as well, and I'm not sure if it was Chelsea. It might have been Chelsea and then Spurs as well. Spurs was involved in the Big Five, who was looking to lead that breakaway of the Premier League from the rest of the English Football League. So this is nothing new for a lot of
Yeah.
these clubs. It's just different faces. It's just different faces. And then even with the whole big picture, it's the same six clubs we're talking about who's looking to go into the European Super League. But once again, same clubs. I say just slightly different faces. And then with even the approval the of the project big picture from the EFL chairman, I think his name is Rick Parry. One thing a lot of people don't realize is Rick Parry was Liverpool's chairman at the time that Liverpool were part of the Big Five to then break away from the English Football League. So it's unlikely that his views would have really changed in terms of the overall picture, like bringing in more money for football.
Mm.
So once again, just same clubs, different faces, or different names just attached to it.
Totally.
That's really it.
I know.
That's it. Because what does a club with who's already bringing in good amount of money want? More money. And what are they going to want after that? More money. Especially
Completely.
when the opportunity is there. Like when there's the opportunity to bring in 300 million for entering a competition, especially considering the amount of money that is currently coming in for being in UEFA's current premier competitions, like is financially is a win-win. and you still have the opportunity to be a part of the Premier League, which a lot of people still don't realize, because this European Super League wasn't a direct competition to the domestic Premier League competitions. It was like their proposal or their breakaway from the Champions League. That's what a lot of people realize. And then the insinuations that they would be using the Premier League as a Carling Cup sort of like alternative is, I think, is very far-fetched. It was a stretch, I think, at the very most. And I said the one person who I think was very very vocal, very influential behind the riling up of fans, I think, is Gary Neville, because you can tell his passion behind it. But I think in certain ways it was a little bit misleading. It was a little bit misleading. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I could talk to you a long time on this subject, but just being very wary of time and stuff. Yeah, it's just mad. I think there's so many, as I've said already before, I think there's so many moving parts to this conversation, and so many moving parts I think, are loving a lot of us, and a lot of those who are listening to this need to, understand a bit more. If that's, the 50+1 rule, if that's the protest themselves, if, are the fans right in this? Are they being a bit spoilt? Are the owners kind of, is it what they're doing, if that's join that Super League or trying to join that Super League, was that right and stuff? So I think there's so many different things. But anyway, Tyrone, thank you so much for coming on to this conversation. Those who are listening, comment down below, like, what do you think about, the football protest? Are football fans right in demanding this change? Are they being a bit spoiled? Comment down your thoughts, and also, like, comment, and subscribe to this amazing channel, to Common Sense. And also, why not you join Common Sense? Hear your views, hear your kind of standpoints on these so many different issues, and find our articles on Common Sense network. And yeah, until the next one, hope you have an amazing day.